The title of my message is A Purpose in Every Step. There's a passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24. 1 Corinthians chapter 29, verse 24 through 27. Don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadow boxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, bring it under complete control. Over the entrance of our church, coming to the foyer, I'm sure you've all noticed it. We have the following words. They are loyalty, honor, courage, and duty. And these are things that we need to embrace, especially in these times in which we live. We live in some, perhaps you could call, scary times. Times when there's a target upon our people, upon our heritage, and upon our children. And these are the things we need if we are going to endure this, and not just endure, but win this race that the Apostle Paul talks about. We need to have and embrace loyalty, honor, courage, and duty. These are the things that necessarily become what the Bible calls an overcomer. And I suspect everybody wants to be an overcomer. Nobody wants to be a loser. I saw a card a while back that said, I'm not really a loser, I just started at the bottom and liked it there. But I don't think that's what most of us would probably want. We want to overcome. We want to be the best we can be in whatever field, whatever activity we are doing. And in this activity we are embracing is really the survival of our people and our heritage, our identity. And we need those things to be this overcomer. The Apostle Paul says in Ephesians 6 that we are battling against, and I know you're all familiar with this, we're battling against flesh and blood. We don't battle against flesh and blood, but we battle against principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, and spiritual wickedness in high places. So these enemy we see here that we have just detest for, you know, with the Nancy Pelosi, the Chuck Schumers, and Joe Bidens, and all some of these others out there, we really abhor. We have to understand that the real power behind them are these spiritual forces which seek to destroy us. And if we don't possess this and embrace this loyalty, honor, courage, and understand the concept of duty, we're not going to be an overcomer. We're going to, as our personal lives will not overcome. I'm sure you're all familiar with the story about the man who goes out and sows seeds. The Bible tells us some of the seed fell upon the wayside, and some of the seed fell among thorny ground or branches, and some fell upon stony ground, and some fell among good ground. And but all the seed whether fell among the thorny ground or thorny branches, or fell among the stony ground, or fell among the good ground, all the seed sprouted. It all sprouted. But some was not able to take root, and some, the heat of the day, killed the roots, killed them as they began to develop. Remember, I told you a few weeks ago in a sermon, I said, titled, you can't do this on your own. We need to embrace this concept of loyalty, honor, courage, and duty. We need friends, we need Jesus, and we need the church. We need each other for this to happen. Because these are the things that will make us able to have this ability to embrace courage, honor, loyalty, and duty. Now, this isn't just something that we should say, well, I believe in loyalty, or I believe in duty, or I believe in courage, I believe in honor, it can't be something you believe. It's got to be something that's inside of you. It's got to be part of you. It's got to be a part of your being. And that's just something you believe in, but it has to be in you. Now in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 21, therefore who cleanses himself will be a vessel of honor, sanctified and useful for the master, prepared for every good work. Now I want to say right off the bat here, so often people pick up the Bible and they look at these churches out here and the Judeo-Christian churches with their idea of spirituality, and they have a hard time understanding what Paul is really saying. Paul's not talking about being like a super spiritual person walking around like this all the time. What he's talking about, if we're going to be successful in maintaining our striving for this against this attempt to genocide us, we need to be people of character. We need to be people who we can rely upon. And he says there, you need to cleanse yourself and to be a vessel of honor. In other words, it just doesn't mean you go be like a holy, super holy person. But really what we're talking about is the purpose of every step is focus. We need to be focusing on what's really important in this day and age in which we live. And what we need to focus on is understanding that there is this attempt to destroy our people, destroy the heritage of God. And then it says there that you have to be sanctified. The word sanctified means just be set apart. Don't be part of this trash out here. There's a lot of people out here that are just trash. And they're not what we want to be around. We want to ensure that we maintain our dignity and not be a part of this trash that had lowered the character of our people, and we want to be prepared for the good work of fighting for white Christian revival. We are combating this rebellion against God, this satanic rebellion referred to in Isaiah 14, this satanic rebellion which seeks to overthrow the power of God. Now I know that usually we hear churches say, well, Satan wants to be worshipped. I've pointed this out to you many times in the past. Satan wants to be worshipped. That is not what Satan wants in this rebellion. What the object of Satan is to overturn God's law, to become the lawgiver. And the most basic natural law that we have is what? Race and gender. Those are the basic laws that God gave us. Every child when it's born only had 2 identification marks. You don't see a baby in a hospital and say, oh, that's a Democrat, or that's a Republican, or that's a lawyer, or that's a barber, or that's a carpenter, that's an accountant. You don't see that. A baby is not born without a certain religion. A baby is born with 2 characteristics that nature gave that child, and that characteristic is what? It's gender and it's race. That is the basic law of nature that God gave. And Satan wants to corrupt that, is what he's seeking to do today. And so he wants to become the lawgiver. But we see this course changing in our society as those ideas or those basic natural values are corrupted. So we're combating the satanic rebellion, and the rebellion wants to violate everything that is good and righteous about race and gender. They want to violate that because they want to violate this very covenant that God made with your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, our people, to violate that covenant, because that is the only way the satanic rebellion can win. There's only one way the satanic rebellion can win, and that is make God sin. And people say, well, God, you can't make God sin. Satan thinks he can make God sin. He thinks he can. You don't start rebellion unless you think you can win, do you? I mean, name me one rebellion in the world that started with the idea, well, we're not going to win. Every rebellion wants to win. And Satan understands there's one way he can win this rebellion if he can make God sin. And how is that? By either making God forsake the covenant he made with Abraham. God made the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, to all their generations, to our people. If we become so wicked that God turns around, turns it back on us, that shows he was unwilling to keep the covenant made with Abraham. or if he should prove that he was unable to keep the covenant to Abraham. And how would that be? If Satan could genocide our people. If the white race is genocided out of existence, that will prove that God is a sinner and cannot keep the covenant that he made with our people. If that's the case, the Satanic Rebellion wins. So this is serious. This is serious business, the way I see it anyway. And so to battle this, there needs to be a purpose in every step. In every step we take, there has to be a purpose in ensuring the survival of our people and our faith. Paul says to cleanse yourself, don't lose focus, maintain your honor, courage, loyalty, your duty, pursuing what's right. He also says sanctify yourself, and that's important that we set ourselves apart and focus on the objective we have. And then in Romans 12 he says, in verse 1, Romans 12, he said, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, I urge you to present yourselves, your bodies, as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. He said, if you're gonna be a part of this struggle, this faith, you got to do it all the way. There are no halfway measures. You do it all the way. Sanctify yourself. Present your body as a sacrifice to this cause, the holy mission. Faithfulness to the kingdom of God. And Paul said we need to be prepared to be an overcomer. There's not a race to see who's the most spiritual, at least not in the way most churches would teach it. You know, most churches really offends me because to me they don't understand righteousness. They think righteous somehow it'd be like it's just a spiritual couch potato. You know, you're just there and you pray all the time, you're just righteous and you don't offend anybody. You know, I mean, Christians should be understanding. Christians should be offending people. That's our job, to offend people. Our job is to offend and point out their wickedness. And the wickedness of this and this perversion, this transgender perversion and the race mixed perversion, point that out. And it offends people. It offends people. So we're not supposed to be couch potatoes. We are facing the spiritual wickedness which is attempting to annihilate our race out of existence. That is the objective of this whole rebellion. What we see happening today is to annihilate our people out of existence. Because that is the only way Satan can win his rebellion. So God is calling men and women who are not going to be couch potatoes, who are willing to cleanse themselves and sanctify themselves and prepare themselves to combat the spiritual wickedness which is in high places. I have a purpose in every step. The spiritual wickedness is not just the ideas that, well, you know, I mean, I think most churches have the idea that, oh yeah, there are a lot of spiritual wickedness out there. And they watch the news, they see all the crime, and say, well, yeah, there's terrible crime. You know, that's not what Paul's talking about. He talked about these forces that are dominating globally, seeking to dominate our very existence and reduce us to become their slaves, to a one world order, and to annihilate our people. Because, like I said, this is the only way the Satanic Rebellion can win. So the person who's running a race to win has to have some good characteristics about them. They have some needs. We call them spiritual needs if you want. But they have to have some spiritual needs. They have some understanding. It doesn't mean they sit around and just think all day, oh, I'm a righteous person. Look, I keep all the right holidays, and I never say a bad word, and I'm always at church every Sunday. I'm a really good person. I know all that. I can recite every book in the Bible. I'm really good, and I know the names of all the apostles, and I can recite all these Bible verses. Well, that might be nice, but that doesn't mean until it means. That doesn't mean anything. I don't care how many Bible verses you quote. If you don't have a love for your race and nation, then you don't have the Spirit of God. So we do have to have this idea that we do have responsibility to ourselves, to our family, to our people. We do have responsibility to our children. We do have responsibility to our people. I am amazed by people who treat their life so carelessly. People who take drugs or commit crimes or cheat on their spouses. Or I see politicians and preachers, and they lose faith. The community loses faith in them. I don't understand how people treat their life so carelessly, but they do. We are engaged in a great struggle and for very survival for our people. God is calling men and women of character. Paul says there must be a purpose at every step. We're in this race to win. And if you're going to be in this race to win, you have to be an overcomer. You have to overcome your weaknesses. You have to be a witness to righteousness. You have to combat the satanic rebellion. And like Paul says, you have to be a good soldier. And Paul says we're running this race. Every step is important. Every time you put your foot down, it's important. But there are some people professing to be Christians who are not running. They're not running the race. They're here, they're alive, they're at church. They're not running the race. The race is too hard for them. It's too difficult for them. Plus they can't endure. I mean, I met people in our movement who shrink because they got somebody called them a racist at work, or a racist on the street, or somebody might identify them as a racist. They shrink away. Now I understand that people in certain capacity need to protect themselves, and I gave a sermon on this a while back about when should you stand up and when you should not stand up. There are times when you're not being a coward for not standing up and identifying yourself as a racist. There are many, many times when it's more important that actually you kind of be undercover, you know, sort of like below the surface, below the radar, you know, if you're doing it for the right purpose of supporting the cause. But as a whole, we need to understand that for most people, we need to understand that we can't be too wrapped up in how the world may look at us. We're running this race. Paul said you got to run to win. In the book of Joel, he said, blow the trumpet in Zion. Sound the alarm in his holy mountain. And Isaiah says, cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their sins. Ezekiel is told to be a watchman and give warning to the people. We're told Jesus tells us to go into the world. Be a light to the world. Jesus said, feed my sheep. And Paul said we are to have a purpose in every step. Feed the sheep. Have a purpose in every step. Who are the sheep? We could have a whole sermon on that. The sheep is Israel, the people, the children of the covenant. The white race, they're the children of God. They're the sheep. As Christians, we have to actually do something. If you're going to profess to be Christian, you have to actually do something. So many people are afraid of, don't want to do anything. Imagine a person saying, claiming I've been called of God, and what have you been called to do? Well, I don't really know. I've been called, I guess, I don't know what I'm called for. You're called to be a witness. So you run with purpose in every step. You discipline yourself. You take complete control of your life. I've suggested from time to time that you should stop and look at the words that are for you and contemplate how you measure up to them. Loyalty, honor, courage, and duty. Are they part of your every step? Do your children or others around you see a purpose in your every step? Do they understand what you are about? Do you understand that you're committed to an ideal that far above the so many people we are surrounded by? There's a big difference in running a race and running a race to win. Lots of people can run a race, but if you're committed to win, you're going to do whatever it takes to win. I could wear heavy clothing and heavy work boots and run in a race, and nobody says I can't wear those things. Don't run in a race. But if I want to win in a foot race, I understand I need to take off those work boots and heavy clothing and get as light clothing as possible and run with purpose in every step. I can run with those heavy clothes on, but I'm not going to win the race. There are lots of things in our lives that are just hold us back and slow us down. Paul said, if there's not a purpose in every step, it is much like a boxer swinging at air. Got to make contact. An overcomer has to be faithful. An overcomer has to have loyalty. An overcomer has to have honor and courage and duty. It's like I pointed out in the past, like having a tool. I have a tool in my toolbox. And I can have a tool that may be a pair of pliers. And the pair of pliers works like the old rusty pair of pliers works the same way as a new pair of pliers. They both do this made and created for the same function, but the one is old and rusty, and it doesn't work very good. And if I'm going to need a pair of pliers, what pliers do I grab and use? I'll always get the newer one, the one that's going to grip good and will operate good. I'm not going to reach out and get the old rusty pair of pliers. There are people in our life, in our movement, who claim to be Christians or can be committed to the cause of white Christian revival, who are just an old pair of pliers. They want to be used. They're sitting in that toolbox and saying, use me, use me, use me. You know, we said, I'm sorry, you're too rusty, I can't use you. Use me, no, I'm sorry, I can't use you, you're too rusty. I'm going to use the one that's prepared himself. Paul says, prepare yourself. Prepare yourself. We were facing some terrible situations in this country. Are we prepared ourselves individually? Are we prepared to be what God needs? And are we prepared to be the example that others need to see? Are we prepared for that? So, I'm going to grab the newer pair of pliers. I'm going to use them. I don't care what the old pair of pliers says. I'm not going to use that old pair of pliers. And unless the old pair of pliers can cleanse himself and sanctify itself, prepare itself, until then I can't use it. And what makes somebody an overcomer? What makes somebody overcome? Is it what he wears? No. Is it where he works? No. Is it because he follows some certain church rituals? No. Is it because he bows at the right time in the church and stands at the right time? No. Is it because he how much money he puts in the bank, or is it because of something else in his life? None of those things make a person an overcomer. Is it because he keeps the right holidays? No. He's an overcomer because of what? Because he follows the commandment of Christ. What was the commandment of Christ? When they're out there, I talked about last week, when they're out there fishing, and after the resurrection, and the fishermen see the man up on the shoreline, and they didn't know who it was, and the man hollers out and said, "Did he catch anything?" Same thing we all say. And they said, "No, we didn't catch anything." Then Peter recognized that it's Jesus. He comes ashore, he sees Jesus, and Jesus cooking some fish. The disciples there stood about, and they're sitting eating this fish, the Bible tells us. And then Jesus says to Peter, "Do you love me?" Peter probably really caught off guard. He said, "Do you love me?" And when Peter said yes, then he said, "Feed my sheep." There are lots of people out here who say they love Jesus. That's easy to say. If you ask to go down the street and say, "Do you love God?" I guarantee almost everybody you stop will say, "Yeah, I love God." Everybody's going to say they love God. Who's going to? Well, there may be a few, like Nancy Pelosi. But anyway, most are going to say they love God. But the answer to that, the proof of that was, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. What does an overcomer do? The overcomer fulfills that responsibility to feed the sheep. Who are the sheep? It's Israel. It's God's people. It's the children of that covenant God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those are the sheep. He said that covenant is going to be lasted along the stars and the moon. In Jeremiah 31, along the stars and the moon and in the universe, our existence. That covenant with our people is being honored by the Lord himself. You love me, feed my sheep. To be an overcomer, feed my sheep. Be an overcomer, be faithful to my sheep. To be an overcomer, honor my sheep. Be loyal to my sheep. Be an overcomer, fulfill their duty to feed my sheep. So, an overcomer needs wisdom, an overcomer needs knowledge, overcomer needs to be willing to teach. I met people who were very, very smart in this movement, but had no wisdom. You need to have wisdom too. That overcomer has the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. That's something we need. We all need that. Those are good characteristics that we need for a functioning family, for a family to work together, for a church body to work together, for those who are overcomers to work together. We need to have joy and peace, and we need long-suffering and patience and gentleness and goodness and faith. We need those things. Read about that in Galatians 5, verse 22. So we're called to live a life of purpose, not a life of compromise. Too many people are willing to compromise. The only ones that compromise are Christians. Non-Christians aren't compromising. Non-Christians are already on the other side. But he said, when we're warned not to compromise, he's talking about us. We are not to compromise our ideals and faith. That's why they hate us. That's why they hate Christians. Because just like there in Daniel, when King Nebuchadnezzar built that statue, he's 90 foot tall, built the plains of Dura, and he told the people, he said, bow down and worship the statue. And we read about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These were three men who were in the higher levels of government in Nebuchadnezzar. These were not just three guys out there in the field. These were part of his administration. They were important, recognizable characters in the administration of Nebuchadnezzar. And they refused to worship that image. And Nebuchadnezzar said, listen, I told you, I'm going to throw you in this furnace. And they said, throw us in the furnace. And if you do throw us in the furnace, we'll tell you this: the Lord we serve will deliver us. But then they said something even more astonishing. They said, but even if he does not deliver us, we still will not worship your worthless God. We're still not going to worship him. Daniel said the same thing. We're still not going to worship your worthless God. And this is why these elements that rise above us today don't like Christians. Because Christians say there's no authority, or Christians say Jesus Christ is the highest authority. Not Joe Biden, not the administration, not the Supreme Court, not some government aid, not some law passed by Congress. You can say whatever you want, you pass whatever laws you want, but we honor only, worship only Jesus Christ. And they don't like that. They believe that they are supreme being. They are an authority. They are to rule over our life. And they don't want you believing there's a higher authority than the government. They don't want you teaching your children there's a higher authority than the government. They believe they are supreme. So we're not supposed to compromise. We don't compromise. Christians are not supposed to compromise. Revelation, I'm going to close very quickly. Revelation chapter 3. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would that thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm, and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Now the word spew is from the Greek word emio. And it doesn't mean spit. It doesn't mean spew, like we read here. It doesn't, even though that's the translators put those words in there, that isn't what emio means. Emio means to vomit. Jesus Christ says, because you're lukewarm, because you compromise, because you're willing to go along with the crowd, even though the Bible said no, don't follow a multitude to do evil. Even if you go along with the crowd, because you're lukewarm, because you compromise, because you do not have purpose in your life, I'm sickened of you, and I'll vomit you out of my mouth. And then he continues on by saying, because thou sayest I am rich, and increase with goods, and have need of nothing. But thou knowest not that thou art wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. And that's all these churches out here. Every church you see up and down the street practically. Not every church. There are many like ours. But for the most part, many churches throughout the country are not willing to take a stand against this evil. They're not willing to stand up against it. They're willing to compromise. They say, well, we don't believe in homosexuality, but they're welcome to come to our church. I've heard that. They're not welcome to this church. Sodomites are not welcome at this church. Transgender people are not welcome to this church. I'm sorry, they're not welcome. We're not going to compromise. And he says that in what they are, though, they are wretched, poor, blind, and naked. They're not degrees. They're not at different degrees in being an overcomer. You're either an overcomer or you're not an overcomer. They're not degrees. They're not levels of being an overcomer. You are an overcomer or you're not an overcomer. Like my father-in-law used to say, you're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. They're all in between. Being an overcomer, not based on what your attitude is. Being an overcomer is whether you overcome, whether you actually overcome. A person either an overcomer or they're not. An overcomer is going to cross the finish line together. Overcomers, they're not just some who are better overcomers and lesser overcomers. There's not some more important overcomers and least important overcomers. Overcomers are overcomers. We're all overcomers. They all cross the finish line together. And so we're told not to compromise. I'm going to finish this verse here, Matthew chapter 4:13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses saltiness, how can it be made salty again? No longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. An overcomer is salt to the earth. An overcomer sends warning to his people. An overcomer is not willing to compromise. An overcomer is someone who's going to run their race. An overcomer is someone who has purpose in every step. An overcomer is somebody to see the destruction that is targeting our people, to annihilate our people, to transgender our children, to amalgamate our race, and sodomize our people. Overcomers, people do not compromise with those things. They're the salt of the earth. Christ says that an overcomer has value, but someone who is not an overcomer has no value at all. Our Father, we thank you for this opportunity we come here and worship you. We pray to be with each and every one that is here today. Guide us, protect us, help us be strong and courageous. Help us never compromise. Help us stand strongly in defense of our race, our faith, our homeland. May we always be courageous. I ask your blessings upon each and every one of us and upon our families. In your holy and precious name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
God's own holy word, I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme and glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story for those who know it best, seem hungering and thirsting to hear it like the rest. And when in scenes of glory I sing the new song, 'twill be the old story that I have loved so long. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme and glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell